Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal, talking all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. Bulldogs coming off a big win over Texas A&M. The Rebels coming off an open date. Ole Miss is back in SEC play this week. Mississippi State is not. We'll talk about football a little bit. I'm going to talk a little basketball first, but Logan, how are you, man?
Yeah, doing good. Yeah, we had tried this last week and had a little technical difficulties. I was using a backup computer while mine was in the shop, and hopefully things will get back to normal and be on a regular basis from every week now.
Well, we'll see. Those technical difficulties can wear you out, man. You know, there used to be the TV station in Meridian when I was working down there. I had their little basketball team that would go off and play at fundraising events, and they were called the technical difficulties. I always thought that was creative on WTOK's part. So anyway, you can find a lot of American culture there, Logan, and pick up names like that and bumper stickers and things of that nature. So
maybe we should have named the show Technical Difficulties.
yeah, maybe we should rename it the Technical Difficulties. So wish us luck here, folks, for the rest of the program. We think it'll be okay. We're getting off to a good start, at least anyway. Basketball, Logan, Ole Miss has a double header with the women and the men both hosting exhibitions on Friday. State's got exhibitions coming up. Let's talk about the Bulldogs a little bit. I noticed a tweet from the marketing department the other day that said, coming in hot. And I thought that was creative as well. The Bulldogs are, in fact, ranked in the preseason and looking for their first NCAA tournament appearance since 2009. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Yeah, it's been about 9 or 10 years since they've been. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's the 08-09 season. It's been a long time, folks. But they made their first postseason appearance last year, made it to the semifinals of the NIT, and I think that was a promising sign for Mississippi State. They were kind of Ben Howland's always somehow in year 3 managed to get his team sort of moving in the right direction. He's always made the postseason in year 3. Most of the time it's the NCAA tournament. Last year it was the NIT. And they brought everybody back. They've got all 5 starters back. 6 out of their top 7 scorers are back. And then they signed a top 20 recruiting class as well. So, they've got a lot of pieces on this year's team. And it should be the makings of a really good basketball team. The problem is the SEC got better as well. So, it's going to be a tough competitive league again this year. And, Mississippi State should be in that mix of those top teams in the league. But, like I said, that's a position they haven't been in a long time. So we'll have to see how they handle what little bit of expectations they have going into this year. They go into the year ranked, I believe it was, 18th in men's basketball. And that's the first time Mississippi State's been ranked in a long, long time, back since Rick Stansbury was the coach. So it's been a long time since this team has made an appearance in the top 25. They enter the year ranked there, and we'll have to see how they can handle up. But Mississippi State right now is one of only 2 schools in the country that are ranked in the top 25 in football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. So that's a pretty good start in some of the bigger sports that Mississippi State plays in.
So all their starters back on the men's side, Logan. Do they still lean on Quindary Weatherspoon? Is this his team, so to speak?
Well, he's one of the seniors. I think it's, kind of him and Eric Holman. They're the 2 seniors that are on this roster, and that gives them a leader at the guard spot, and it gives a leader down low. But you look at Lamar Peters and just kind of the maturation that you saw from him the second half of last season. He's going to be the point guard. He's a guy that has NBA potential. So we'll have to see if that kind of comes to fruition this year. There's a lot of talent on this team. Obviously, Nick Weatherspoon had a huge freshman year last season. He's coming back as a sophomore, and a lot of times you see that big jump from a freshman year to a sophomore year. So we'll have to see how he handles that. Abdul Adu is back down low, and he had spurts and signs last year that he could be a potential big-time player, but, just never really put it all together. You saw flashes of it, but, we'll have to see if he can become a big-time scorer down there. He's really good on the defensive end, really good at rebounding. He scored the basketball some, but it was kind of an opponent type of issue, whoever he was going against, where that was a favorable matchup for him. But, we'll have to see how he matures in that regard. And then those highly touted freshmen they brought in, DJ Stewart, Robert Woodard, Reggie Perry, all of those are 4-star guys. So they're going to get their chances this year as well.
Logan, give us a Cliff Notes look at the ladies. How are they shaping up after another shot at the national title last year?
Well, it's going to be a much different team. I mean, they've only got one starter back, and of course, anytime you can build your team around a 6'7" senior center like Tierra McCowan is a good place to start. But they've got to replace a lot of pieces surrounding her. So we'll have to see kind of how things mix. Mississippi State comes in the year ranked number 6th in the country. They're picked to win the SEC again this year. So it's going to be a different style of team. I don't know if they'll be quite as talented. They're definitely not as experienced as they were a year ago, but I think the floor for this team is probably a Sweet 16. I don't know that they make it to the Elite Eight, Final Four, national championship game this year. They could, but right now I think it's probably a Sweet 16 type of team, and we'll have to kind of see how that everything gels together as the season goes on. But I think that's probably the floor for them this year is a Sweet 16 berth.
All right, and exhibitions for them are when?
The women play Friday night. We've actually got a women's basketball media day this afternoon. I'll head to that as soon as we wrap up the show. And then they've got the women play Friday night and the men play on Sunday afternoon at 2:00. So busy weekend with women's basketball exhibition Friday night, men's football against Louisiana Tech on homecoming Saturday, and then men's basketball again on Sunday. So a lot of riding and a lot of ball watching for me this weekend.
I understand, and the same in Oxford. Ole Miss with that doubleheader of basketball exhibitions. The women play at 3:00 Friday, the men at 6. 2 new coaches, Logan, for both of them. Let's start with the ladies. I don't know much about this team right now because almost everyone is new. It's the first season under new head coach Yolette McPhee-McEwen, and I will just tell you this, Logan. I don't know if you have been around her a little bit. I think you were at SEC basketball media days there, and so you know how enthusiastic she is right now, and it's just a very high energy approach, and she is a person who, and we've heard this before, Logan. Lots of coaches will come in and say, hey, we're just going to outwork the opponent. Nobody's going to work harder than we work. Well, that's kind of the atmosphere that McPhee-McEwen is building right now, one of energy and effort and hard work. And look, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, the Rebels won just one conference game last year and Matt Insel's final season. And Logan, lots of teams have a new coach come in and deal with some attrition. I've never seen more attrition than the transition the Ole Miss women are making right now from Matt Insel to McPhee-McEwen. I think from my count, there are only 3 players on the team right now who were there last year. So she gets hired in March and has to basically put together a complete roster. And so what you have is a mix of transfers and some high school kids. And she has said she was very selective in how she went about this, how she went about building this roster, not only trying to get through this season, but also keeping an eye on the future as well. And, one of those returnees is Chandrika Sessom, who was named preseason All-SEC second team by the coaches. But again, this is not a team, not a program right now with a lot of talent. This is a program with an eye on the future, trying to play hard, play with effort, win when they can, win as many games as they can, but basically trying to build for the future. Now, one of the girls on this team, Logan, you recognize LaCara Salter, who began her career at Mississippi State and then transferred to Jacksonville, where she played with McPhee-McEwen, and now she's at Ole Miss. And they call her the big ticket, Logan. She's a big girl and very athletic for her size, and can score in the post, score outside the post. This is what we're told, Logan. I haven't seen these ladies play yet, but when you hear coaches building up players like this, you always raise an eyebrow a little bit. Statistically, there's nothing to suggest that Salter will be a dominant player. She may be one of the best players on this team, and maybe this is a breakout season for her in terms of double-figure scoring and things like that. But she is definitely a player that Ole Miss will count on, as well as Sessom, and we'll just see how things evolve in the first year of the new administration here with the Ole Miss ladies. Flipping the page here to the men, it's interesting, Logan. We talked about this at SEC basketball media days there outside of Birmingham, over there in Mountain Brook at that resort, the resort where they couldn't even fit the entire event inside. But anyway, it was interesting to watch Ole Miss's winningest basketball coach at one end of the room on the SEC network set, and then the Middle Tennessee guy come up and tell us about the Rebels at the other end. So, Kermit Davis is the new Ole Miss coach after a long 16-year run at Middle Tennessee. Lots of success the last 9 years, lots of teams with not just 20 wins, but 23, 24, 25 and more wins. Lots of success in the back half of his tenure there as he built that Blue Raiders program. And they became known as teams that overachieved in postseason, knocked off the Giants in the NCAA tournament with wins against Michigan State and Minnesota. Maybe Kermit should have scheduled some Big Ten guys this first go round. But anyway, he has a rebuilding job ahead of him as well. And we'll just see, Logan, what he can get done with this Ole Miss team that won 5 SEC games last year in Andy Kennedy's final season as coach. Kennedy, of course, retiring in February, resigning, and Tony Madlock taking over as interim coach for one of those wins at Missouri. The Rebels returned 3 pretty good guards there in Terrence Davis, Brian Tyree, and Devontae Shuler. So that's going to kind of be the nucleus for Davis to build around. He did not deal with as much attrition as McPhee McEwen did. He was able to keep most of that roster intact and add to it. So he's going to have a backcourt there that he can play with, and some freshmen coming in who are talented that will get a chance to provide some depth as well. A couple of those guys are hurt right now and still on the mend, getting better. So it'll be a while before they really can contribute in games. The question mark for this Ole Miss team in this first season under Kermit Davis is going to be post defense. What they can get done there with Bruce Stevens and Dominique Olenichek. Logan Stevens just wasn't very good defensively last year after transferring from Jones County Junior College. He's an athletic guy at 6'10". He can score in the post and he can shoot outside from the perimeter. But defense was an issue for him. And defense is something that Kermit Davis really stresses and is really, these guys are working on defense more than they have in the past. Okay. So anyway, we'll see if Stevens can take that step defensively. But outside of that, and this was a common theme last year, we've heard Andy Kennedy talking all season long about the need for scoring from his power forward, the need for offensive production from the 4. That's going to, again, be a question mark for this Ole Miss team, and it's going to come down to what type of production they can get from a couple of freshmen in Blake Henson and KJ Buffin, guys that Kermit Davis recruited and brought in, and he compares them to some of the more successful players he had in the style he wanted to play and did play at Middle Tennessee, guys who are big. These guys are 6'7"-ish, physically, pretty stout, and can also run the floor and play out on the perimeter. Athletic 4s, those are the kind of kids he's looking for at this position. And frankly, I thought his signing class in the spring was better than I thought it would be for a new coach coming in who didn't recruit the early signing period at this school. We'll see if these guys can help a little bit. But those will be the question marks for the Ole Miss men this basketball season, I think. Post defense and production from that 4, whatever they can get. And I'm curious to see how this team plays defensively. They had a summer trip to Canada to get some games in that way. And we'll just see. It's going to be a big part of Davis's philosophy. There will be defense. So exhibitions on Friday at 3 with the women and 6 with the men, and then basketball season will be here soon. After that, Logan, it's right around the corner.
It is, and it's always a busy time when you have the sports start overlapping, and we have so many responsibilities with football every week, and then you throw some basketball on top of that, and it used to not be that quite as bad, when Mississippi State's women's program wasn't at the level that it's at right now. But a lot of the times over the last few years, the women have been more of a priority than the men have, and that's kind of a reversal of roles there. But kind of have to pay attention to everything in the big, I call it the big four sports here at Mississippi State right now.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how all that meshes out, Logan. If the women's team ranked number 6, maybe that's too high right now, given all of their losses. I know they return a great player there in McCowan, but if they stay at that top 10 level, obviously they're going to demand attention as well. It'll be interesting to see how Mississippi State season ticket buyers respond to that too, because sometimes you have to choose. Turning the page here, let's talk football a little bit, Logan. Tell us about the Texas A&M game. Obviously, it just sounded like Nick Fitzgerald played with a chip on his shoulder after such a poor passing performance in the Bulldogs' loss at LSU.
Yeah, and it's really been a poor passing performance all of SEC play. I think his best performance was in that first game against Kentucky. He threw for 145 yards in that one. Then it dropped down to, I think, 98 against Florida, 69 against Auburn, and then 59 and 4 interceptions against LSU. He had not thrown a touchdown pass at all in SEC play, and had thrown 6 interceptions going into that Texas A&M game, but had an outstanding game, just an incredible bounce back game, and it was really what he needed. It was coming down. They were going to give Keaton Thompson some reps going into that ball game, just because Nick had underperformed. He was running the ball extremely well, but just wasn't getting it done in the passing game. But he turns around in that Texas A&M game, goes 14 of 22, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and then he ran for 88 yards and 2 more touchdowns. So a big game for him, a big game for the offense, who was struggling to put points up on the board, and they were able to do that against Texas A&M. State's defense has been lights out all year long, and had given Mississippi State a chance to be undefeated at this point, but the offense was just so bad. They've lost some close games just because they couldn't score. And State's offense got back on track a little bit last week, 384 yards against Texas A&M. Not just an elite defense, at A&M, but a pretty good defense at that. And it gave them some confidence. They've got a homecoming game this week against Louisiana Tech. Not a pushover team at all. Louisiana Tech is already bowl eligible at 6-2, but Mississippi State went down to Ruston and whooped up on them pretty good last year. So if they can go into this game this weekend, build some more confidence in the non-conference season, obviously you got a really, really tall task the next week at Tuscaloosa against top-ranked Alabama. But then you finish up the season against Arkansas and Ole Miss. You got a chance to become bowl eligible this weekend against Louisiana Tech, and then you've got an opportunity those last 2 weeks to build upon that and better your bowl opportunities from there. So they need to get their offense, a repeat performance against Louisiana Tech, and then just take your best shot at Alabama.
Well, Louisiana Tech already has played well at LSU. Played better there than either Ole Miss or Mississippi State this season. So you think Lou Holtz, does he come out and toss the coin maybe in honor of the skipper?
I'm not sure what Lou is. I'd love to see him again. He's always a comical guy. But Scoop Holtz, obviously a big name that most folks know, coaching Louisiana Tech. And like I said, Mississippi State, Louisiana Tech threw the first punch last year in Ruston, but Mississippi State was able to bounce back. Jeffrey Simmons had a huge game. In my opinion, probably the best game ever by nose guard. I mean, you look at what he did in that ball game. He blocks a punt, recovers it in the end zone, scoops up a fumble, returns it 90 yards for a touchdown. He blocks I believe it was either a field goal or an extra point in that game. Just unbelievable game from a guy that's 300 pounds, 6'4", and I don't know that I'll ever see or read about a nose guard having a game like that ever again.
All right, so Tech throws the first punch last year, but then it looked like the Bulldogs just went running out of the ring. Ole Miss, Logan, the Rebels are back in action this week against South Carolina. And Matt Luke trotted out the Remember November line earlier this week, and I had to chuckle because I thought Houston Nutt had like exclusive rights to that line. I heard so much when Nutt was the Ole Miss coach. But the fact is, November was a very good month for Luke and the Rebels last year. They went 3-1. Their loss was at home by a touchdown to Texas A&M. But in that span, they had road wins at Kentucky and at Mississippi State. So it was a good month, and it was capped off at the end with Luke having the interim tag removed and being named the permanent as you can be in this business, permanent coach at Ole Miss. A different setup this year for the month of November. Part of that 3-1 finish last year was a non-conference win over the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Let's make sure we get that in there. That was part of Ole Miss's finish last season. So no non-conference games in November this time. If the Rebels are going to finish strong, they're going to have to do it all against the SEC. And frankly, I look at the schedule remaining, and I think Texas A&M, both Texas A&M and State are better than they were a year ago. And that Texas A&M game is on the road, where the Rebels have won the last 2 times, by the way. We'll see if they can pull that off again. That comes up after South Carolina. But this week, Logan, I think is interesting because what Ole Miss still needs to do, in my mind, is show that they can score touchdowns against middling SEC opponents, okay? They did that against Arkansas, and they won a high-scoring game. To me, the high-scoring game this season is always going to be the recipe for success for Ole Miss. That's just where this team is defensively. They played a good defensive half in the second half against Arkansas. That put them in position to win. The offense came back. They were better in the red zone than they would prove to be the following week against Auburn, and they get an SEC win there against a defense that's ranked pretty low in the conference numbers, okay? Fast forward the next week to Auburn at home, and this Ole Miss offense was moving between the 20s, but in the red zone, it just bogged down, Logan. And when you start kicking those short field goals, when your field goals are less than 20 yards, or excuse me, less than 30 yards, then you're messing up. Ole Miss had 4 red zone trips against Auburn, didn't score a touchdown until there were about 2.5 minutes left. That was on a 12-yard pass from Jordan Tiamu to A.J. Brown. By that time, the Rebels trailed 31-9. They went on to lose 31-16. So they've had 2 weeks to work on the red zone, and I don't think you're going to see any gimmicky plays. I don't think they're fixing to try to reinvent the wheel down there. What we've heard during the week was Matt Luke and Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator, both returned to familiar themes and words that fans have heard this year about execution and winning one-on-one battles. And, you know, it sounds cliche, but that's what needs to happen for Ole Miss in the red zone. I don't think you're going to see a lot of new plays. You may see a little more intentional throwing to the tight end. They've begun to talk about that the last 2 weeks where they had not over the course of the season. I think that's a good thing. I think a little play action fake to Scotty Phillips, who has been a real weapon at running back, you know, can freeze a linebacker, maybe draw one in, and you can sneak a very athletic Dawson Knox out there, get him open in the red zone. You may see some of that this week. But again, sometimes when they say, oh, we're going to do this, they don't really do it. You know, maybe it's just a smoke screen, but that could be something that you see in the red zone, a little more intentional throwing to the tight end. It was interesting, Logan, to hear Ole Miss defensive players and coaches this week talk about South Carolina quarterback Jake Bentley and his ability to throw deep, to take the top off the defense and things of that nature. I think beat writers in both Oxford and Columbia were hearing the same thing, because I have no doubt that over there they were talking about Ole Miss quarterback Jordan Tiamu and his ability to throw deep. Look, both of these secondaries for Ole Miss and South Carolina are banged up, are without key players, and frankly just aren't very good right now. So both of them are susceptible to the big play. The Rebels are going to need to work hard to take that away from South Carolina. They're going to get back C.J. Miller this week, a sophomore. Any guy you get back at this stage of the season is a good thing. That's good news, but I don't look for the return of Miller, who was a reserve until C.J. Moore went out with a torn pectoral muscle. So we're talking about a guy who was not a starter until there was an injury. I don't think his return is going to make a huge impact. Defensively, I think this team is kind of what it is right now. I don't see it getting miraculously better over the last 4 games. That's something that needs to be addressed in recruiting and in the offseason. But they will at least have that one more body in the secondary this week. And, Logan, when you put 2 average, closely matched teams on the field together, lots of times it comes down to which team makes the fewest mistakes. So if Ole Miss tackles better than it did against Auburn, and tackling has been erratic this year, if they can lock in and make some plays in the secondary, then maybe they do make fewer mistakes. But again, I think, if Ole Miss is going to win conference games, it's going to come down to the offense executing and scoring touchdowns in the red zone. I think they have a better chance to do that this week against South Carolina than they have against some of the better defenses. And I don't know right now that you put Auburn in that category of better defenses, but I'll say more talented defenses, okay? Because Auburn's recruiting classes in the last 4 years have been top 10 and one of them number 12, so there's talent on that roster. I would say Auburn, LSU, Alabama, those are all very talented defenses. Maybe South Carolina is just a little bit below that. And Ole Miss, a team with 2 projected first-round draft picks on offense, you got to find a way to impose your will. You've got to find a way to score touchdowns in the red zone, and that could be the difference in this game. The Rebels have had 2 weeks to work on that and prepare. We'll see what they were able to get done. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Be sure and come back and join us next week.